here to leave this town. And nobody would believe it. And I was just looked at like I was just some kook out on a limb. Then eventually I made Roger and me, and I made that movie in the hopes that people here in other towns like Flint would listen. And nobody still wanted to listen.
If you look at Michael's movie, it looks like the people were apathetic in Flint, Michigan, and they were the furthest thing from apathetic in Flint.
The UAW had promised that a massive demonstration would be held on the last day of the factory. Only 4 workers showed up to protest the plant closing.
If Michael had truly captured what was going on in Flint, Michigan, I think other communities across the country would have seen it and said, we can fight back. You show people winning, and then they're going to fight.
Are there any techniques for storytelling that should not be used in documentary filmmaking? Well, I think you have the right to employ just about anything you can to make a good movie that's entertaining, as long as you're telling the truth.
He said, you know, I can tell the media anything. If you tell them anything enough, they'll believe it.
You were asking for an interview in an audience with Roger, and you were turned down every time?
Every time. We wrote, we phoned, we faxed, we tried every means available, but we couldn't get him to respond.
In 1990, Premier Magazine discovered that Michael got 2 interviews with Roger Smith. No one took much notice.
We went to the Waldorf Astoria in New York. It wasn't a shareholders meeting. It was just for the people who owned the most shares of General Motors, the corporate investors, Wall Street, and they wanted to show off their new cars and say how great they were and everything. Michael and I got in and got access to Roger Smith. You know, he sat there and answered questions for about 10 or 15 minutes. And it was some great footage because it was Smith answering questions one-on-one from Michael.
The shareholders meeting, which he actually puts in Roger and me, they cut off his mic or something?
But he actually did talk to Roger Smith. He did talk to Roger Smith, and they had a conversation. There was a 2-page transcript of questions going back and forth between Michael and Roger. That's what was in Premier Magazine. Michael and I were sitting together, and I had called for Roger Smith to resign.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest on Monday, if there's an announcement about Mr. McDonald resigning, that you join in and resign with him.
Michael then, for the movie, gets into an old theater and cuts and pastes it so it makes it look like Michael was cut off.
His microphone wasn't cut off.
He was not cut off.
I have one question.
All right, moved and adjourned. Thank you all very much. You've been a great audience. I would tell you then, I'll tell you that, we never cut him off.
You never cut him off?
No, it's not our style.
I talked to Roger Smith about the shareholders meeting. He wasn't that difficult to find.
Why didn't you guys respond to his film when it came out and say that didn't happen?
Well, I think the best advice we were getting at that time from people was it's just better not to respond to something as bad as that was.
Michael called me in the middle of the night and just said, basically, can you just say that this doesn't exist? And I said, it exists. There's a transcript of it. I'm not going to fall on my sword for you. I said to him, Michael, you talked to him twice already. How can you do a movie on something you've done already? He said, well, I can make it look like anything I want. It'll just go on a cutting room floor. And I would get calls from people who were, quote unquote, pretty high up on the left, and they'd say, you have to stand up and lie for them. And they'd say, the ends justify the means. I said, isn't that what the CIA says? Isn't that what our military says? It's always the ends justify the means. And you can't live by that mentality.
If you won't tell the truth because it's bad for the cause, then the cause becomes a fiction, which is exactly what's happened. It's happened with the left in the United States as a whole, and it's happened with Michael Moore.
He's quite capable of putting the Mac in Machiavellian. I say that with love, not any hate, but he is driven to get things done by any means necessary, and I don't hold that against him.
I'll never forget, I was with him shortly after he cut the deal with Warner Brothers. I said, Michael, you know, the most money you've ever made in your life was like $28,000 a year. And he said, yeah, if you ever see me sitting in a hot tub sipping champagne, come beat me with a baseball bat.
You're the same Michael Moore as the one who started doing movies in Flint?
Yeah, I am that same person. If I ever stop thinking like that, I'm doomed. And my work will be doomed. I have to stay true to who that person always was and still is.
Love Michael Moore, worship him.
The culture of celebrity does have something to do with Michael Moore's popularity. And he's very aware of the way that Americans respond to celebrities because he himself has so successfully melded entertainment and politics. It has blurred into one thing for him, and it's really not.
America's celebrity-driven, and so we create these icons, and then we look to them for answers when so many times they have other agendas which are tied to themselves or tied to other things. Michael! If you want true social change in America, it's got to come from the ground up. It's not going to come from celebrities. And it was always about him rather than the movement. Everyone wanted to hold Michael up there as the savior of the left, when he wasn't trying to save the left, he was just trying to create an image for himself. And that's the saddest thing, is who we put our faith in. We follow leaders too much, we don't follow what's in our own heart and soul enough.
Over 100 lovely exotic dancers. You will have a great time today at Nathan J's, home of the centerfolds. And listen, you can justify it to your spouse by saying, hey, I went there for the $1 lunch.
Mr. Boyce, we actually allowed into the Hall of Fame while he sat on the selection committee of the Hall of Fame. But we overlooked that.
According to Roger Moore, when he did the movie
Roger Smith.
No, I'm talking Roger Moore, the filmmaker. Michael Moore. There you go. Michael Moore.
Michael Moore and Roger Smith.
I get James Bond and Michael Moore mixed up all the time.
Everyone does.
Exactly.
I have two hats, a Detroit Tigers and a Detroit Red Wings hat. All other hats are either forced on me at events like this, or they are sent to me and my wife throws them away.